Jonah waited until night to read the letter. Not because he needed darkness, but because daylight still felt aligned with rules, and this no longer did. He sat in the repair shop long after closing, the overhead lights off, the space lit only by a single desk lamp casting a tight circle on the scarred wood. The air smelled the way it always had: oil, dust, old heat trapped in metal, familiar enough to keep his hands steady. The envelope lay open in front of him. This time, he didn't skim, didn't brace, didn't stop. He read, Jonah dash dash. If you're reading this without interruption, then something has already gone wrong. Or exactly right. That line alone made Jonah pause. He exhaled slowly, then continued. I assumed there would be people eager to prevent you from finishing this. That assumption was not paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Jonah's jaw tightened. Merrick's voice came through clearly in the writing. Not dramatic, not sentimental. Controlled, precise, like a man who expected to be doubted and accounted for it anyway. I prepared this letter in stages. You are reading the final one. That means you are no longer protected by ignorance, and I am no longer obligated to simplify. Jonah leaned back slightly, the chair creaking under his weight. The fire was never meant to be proof. Proof demands honesty from systems built to avoid it. The fire was meant to create time. That word again. Time. Jonah read it twice before moving on. You will hear people say I died because I was reckless, or proud, or unwilling to compromise. Those explanations are comforting. They imply inevitability. They remove choice. The letter continued without apology. I didn't die that night. I exited. The distinction matters. Jonah's breath caught, not sharply, not dramatically, but enough that he noticed it. He read on. Disappearance is not absence. It is redirection. People mistake the two because disappearance feels final to those who remain still. Jonah stared at the page, the edges blurring just slightly. Merrick hadn't written like a man leaving behind a legacy. He had written like a man continuing one. If you are wondering how this was possible, ask instead why it was necessary. The letter didn't explain the logistics. Not yet. It didn't offer names or diagrams or tidy confessions. It offered context, motive. Justice depends on timing. I had none. They had all of it. So I took what they underestimated. Jonah thought of the investigation, the rushed conclusions, the comfort people took in calling the fire an accident, because accidents didn't demand accountability. I expected them to move on. I expected them to grow careless. I expected patience to rot their vigilance. Jonah felt something shift, not shock, but alignment, like pieces finally sliding into a shape that had always been there. If you are angry with me, that is reasonable. Anger suggests proximity. It means you are close enough to matter. The desk lamp flickered once, then steadied. What comes next will not feel like resolution. It will feel like delay. That is intentional. Jonah lowered the letter for a moment, rubbing a hand over his face. Merrick hadn't wanted closure. He had wanted leverage. Jonah picked the page back up. There were others involved, not co-conspirators, custodians, people who understood that survival sometimes requires being misremembered. A pause formed in Jonah's mind, not confusion, but implication. Someone else helped orchestrate it, not Anton, not Richard, and someone quieter. You will hear rumors. Let them circulate. Rumors create noise. Noise creates cover. Jonah swallowed. If the fire is revisited, it will not be because the truth resurfaced. It will be because time finally made room for it. That line stayed with him. Time didn't reveal truth. It made space for it. I did not expect justice, Jonah. Justice is reactive. I expected time. Time favors those who can wait without being seen. Jonah folded the letter slowly, his hands steady now for a different reason. The fire hadn't been an end. It had been a pause, a long one. He thought of the evidence that never quite added up. The body identified too quickly, the records logged, then relogged, the way no one had ever pushed too hard, as if something invisible pressed back. He looked around the shop, at the tools still hanging where Merrick left them, at the desk no one touched, at the silence that had always felt respectful but now felt instructed. The world hadn't moved on because it had solved anything. It had moved on because it had been allowed to. Jonah stood, slipping the letter back into its envelope, placing it carefully inside his jacket. Outside, the street was quiet, too quiet for the city at this hour. As he locked up the shop, one thought settled in with unsettling clarity. If Merrick Voss had planned for time, then the fire wasn't the mystery anymore. It was the invitation, and someone, somewhere, had finally decided to accept it. Jonah didn't go looking for holes in the story. They found him. It started with something small, too small to justify the way it stayed with him. A date. He was sitting in his car outside a municipal records building, engine idling, Merrick's letter folded thin in his pocket. He had come for one thing only, the fire report. Not answers, just confirmation. A way to quiet the part of his mind that had started refusing closure. He scanned the timeline with the detached focus of someone trained to fix what was broken. Alarm triggered at 11:42 p.m. First responders arrived at 11:51. Fire declared under control at 12:36 a.m. Standard. Clean. Then he noticed the witness list. Or rather, what wasn't there? 2 names referenced in the initial call logs didn't appear in the formal statements. Not crossed out, not redacted. Gone. Jonah leaned back, letting the paper rest on the steering wheel. Witnesses don't vanish from paperwork by accident. They vanish by permission. Mira found her first crack somewhere else, in her mother's attic. Lydia kept everything, documents folded too neatly, files organized by emotional weight rather than relevance. Mira hadn't meant to search. She was looking for old tax records, something harmless. Instead, she found a folder labeled temporary. Inside were copies of news clippings from the fire, carefully preserved. Alongside them, notes written in Lydia's hand. Not commentary, corrections, times circled, names underlined. Margins filled with questions that had never been asked out loud. One clipping listed Merrick's body as recovered at 1:12 a.m. Another, published 2 days later, listed identification confirmed at 3:40 a.m. Same body, different timelines. Mira felt a slow chill creep up her spine. Bodies don't exist in 2 times unless someone wants them to. Jonah went deeper. He pulled maintenance records for the warehouse, electrical inspections, safety citations. The wiring had been old, but not faulty. Repairs were logged less than a month before the fire. Someone had signed off on them. The signature wasn't Richard's. It wasn't Anton's. It belonged to a third-party consultant who had testified briefly, vaguely, then disappeared from the case entirely. Jonah searched the name. No recent records. No updated address. No digital footprint beyond the year of the fire. A man who existed exactly as long as he was needed. Mira stood at the river again days later, watching the water move with the same indifference it always had. She replayed conversations from her childhood, things Anton had said that never felt important enough to challenge. The problem with fires is everyone wants to look at the flames. Paper burns faster than truth. She had thought those were metaphors. Now she wasn't so sure. The fire hadn't just destroyed records. It had erased sequence. And without sequence, nothing could be proven. Nothing could be anchored. Certainty itself had burned. Jonah finally requested the autopsy file. The clerk hesitated. Just a fraction too long. "It's incomplete," she said carefully. "How incomplete?" Jonah asked. She slid the file across the desk. Dental records confirmed. Height and weight approximate. Cause of death listed as smoke inhalation. No fingerprints on record. Jonah looked up. "Why?" The clerk shrugged. Hands were too damaged. Jonah thought of Merrick's hands. Steady, capable. The hands that built systems and understood their weaknesses. Hands that might be deliberately unidentifiable if someone needed them to be. They spoke that night, Jonah and Mira, not together but overlapping, each filling in gaps the other hadn't yet named. 2 witnesses disappeared, Jonah said. "The body was never fully confirmed," Mira replied. "Evidence logged twice. Times that don't match. Repairs that contradict the official cause. A pattern emerged, not of error, but of permission. Someone had decided how much truth the world was allowed to hold, and someone else had enforced it. The realization didn't land like shock. It settled like weight. The fire hadn't been an accident that turned tragic. It had been a controlled collapse, a way to remove proof and certainty in one motion. Merrick's death had worked because it didn't need to be believed. It only needed to be accepted. The truth is about to be revealed. Like, subscribe, and watch out for part 4.